The administration has been trying to play it pretty close to the vest on this. What do you think we're going to hear tomorrow?
Well, we do know that they want to target those responsible for Navalny's death, in the words of the president himself and others in the administration. And that might mean Putin himself, further sanctions on him and others acting alongside him. So we do not, they have been, yes, as you say, keeping it very close to their chest. They don't want to telegraph for obvious reasons, as they say, who or what they might be sanctioning tomorrow. But it will be something pretty big. They had already planned to kind of hit them on the two-year anniversary of the war. And now with Navalny's death, there's ever more reason to punish Russia.
Yep, that two-year anniversary also on Saturday, the 24th. Meantime, the president right now is in California on a fundraising swing, and he often says some pretty remarkable things at fundraisers. At one of them, a few months ago, he called Chinese President Xi Jinping a dictator. And then last evening, he referred to Vladimir Putin, who we were just discussing, as a crazy SOB, not really holding back on the language. Michelle.
Yeah, no, certainly an opportunity at these fundraisers. They're closed door. There tend to be smaller groups, friendlier faces. It's an opportunity for Biden to kind of let loose a little bit. We do see him being kind of more Biden the candidate, Biden the person. His folksy nature comes out. And this comment, while very headline friendly and entertaining to many, it's the president of the United States speaking about a world leader. No matter who that world leader is, it does carry a lot of weight. And he was able to kind of craft it into a broader message as he vented about Trump, MAGA Republicans, those he says are enabling someone like Putin, and further cementing the message of the Biden campaign that Trump would be a threat to the democracy, that people like Putin are a threat to U.S. democracy because of what they do to democracy abroad.
Michelle, we've got the matter of the border that we're dealing with as well. The president constantly spinning multiple plates here, and there is talk of an executive action coming. It actually already drew a response from the Speaker of the House, who called it election year gimmicks, even though Republicans said that the president should act on his own. The matter of immigration is not going away for Joe Biden, and we talked about that with Gallup's editor-in-chief, Mohammed Yunus, earlier today on Bloomberg. Here's what he said.
Right now, immigration is the open-ended answer of the most important problem facing America by 28% of Americans, and that is a very significant increase just coming up in the last several months. So as the situation at the border gets more critical, I think this topic is going to absolutely be coming up time and again.
Michelle, we're going to talk to Congressman Brad Sherman in just a moment about this, about a potential legislative answer, which has just not been there for months and months. This matter of the border has been weighing down Ukraine funding, for instance. Does the president think he needs to go out on his own?
Yeah, well, there are reasons to and reasons not to go for unilateral action at this point. I think if you take a look at the short list of reasons to go for it, President Biden really sees this as hand in hand with Ukraine funding, which he really wants, he really needs for reasons as we just discussed. He also feels like maybe he can point out that he's the one that's doing something in the face of Republicans' intransigence on this issue. And we're coming up, it seems like every time I join you guys, we're on the brink of another potential shutdown. So this is a really key time to show that he's responding to voters. The figures that Mohammed mentioned just affirm what we've seen in our own Bloomberg Morning Consult polling, where 6 in 10 swing state voters lay at least some of the blame and responsibility at Biden's feet for the border issue. So he knows he needs to act. But then there are also real reasons why maybe politically he shouldn't act. He doesn't want to enable the House Republicans or get them off the hook for inaction. These are questionably legal decisions. This is why the White House has held out for so long. They talk about rule of law. They talk about wanting to go the legal authority route, the proper route. And this would maybe raise those questions and inevitably would trigger court cases that they would have to deal with down the line.
All right, Michelle Jamrisko, thank you so much. Of course, as we talk about the immigration issue that may be working against the incumbent president, there's also the issue of the economy, which he doesn't get great marks for. And on that note, we have to talk about Federal Reserve policy, because Federal Reserve Vice Chair Philip Jefferson said today the Fed needs to guard against cutting interest rates too fast. He spoke earlier at the Peterson Institute for International Economics here in Washington.
We always need to keep in mind the dangers of easing too much in response to improvements in the inflation picture. Excessive easing can lead to a stalling or reversal in progress in restoring price stability.
Joining us now is Bloomberg's Enda Curran. So, Enda, it's interesting to have this conversation an hour after markets closed at record highs once again. Arguably, financial conditions are getting easier, even with the Fed not cutting rates. If they cut, they might feed into that and risk losing the fight against inflation. But this is a really politically charged, difficult decision for them as well. Even if they don't want politics to factor in, there is an election in November, and where rates are will matter.
It's very tricky for them. I think the message from the Fed, from Vice Chair Jefferson today, and other officials today and recently is they're nervous about this inflation story. They're not convinced it's completely coming back down to the 2% target that it should be. They don't want to cut rates too soon and have to reverse gear. Now, you're seeing markets responding as well. Markets are taking those bets on rate cuts out of the system. So the point is, yes, the Fed officials on the one hand are cooling the narrative on when rate cuts might come. Markets are starting to respond and believe them, pushing back bets on the rate cuts might come. And of course, that's going to feed into the whole political cycle. Does inflation remain higher than expected, a sting in consumers' pockets, and rates remain high going into the election towards the end of the year? It's a very big economic question, and of course it's a very sensitive political issue as well.
Well, more Fed speak, and in this case, Philadelphia Fed President Patrick Harker earlier today at the University of Delaware. Listen.
Yes, I do believe that we may be in a position to see rates decrease this year. But I would caution anyone from looking for it right now and right away. We have time to get it right, as we must.
How's the market adjusting to this? And there was a time when investors were placing bets on cuts in March. Where are we now?
Oh, they're pushing it right back. You've got people now obviously dropping their March bets. Joe, talking about maybe June, maybe July. We had jobless claims data today. Lowest in months, speaking to the idea that the jobs market is still strong. And that's, by the way, despite the headlines, and we have been seeing headlines of well-known brands, big corporations cutting staff, but that's not yet coming through in the data. That, of course, is key to keeping the consumer strong. If the consumer is strong, that lends itself to inflation remaining somewhat elevated, and all of that mitigates against the Fed having to cut rates in the near term. So, as I mentioned to Kailey earlier, there's a huge economic debate about this. When do you move too soon? When do you take that risk? But, of course, there's a huge political angle to this as well, given where inflation and rates are.
Speaking of political debates, there is a deal that is in the works that may or may not ultimately get through because it has been quite politically contentious. The Nippon Steel buying U.S. steel. We had a scoop here at Bloomberg this afternoon that the Biden administration is now looking into concerns about Nippon's connections to China in particular. Could this make sure that this thing does not go through?
Well, it's certainly going to draw scrutiny. As my colleagues were saying, Nippon has operations in China. Of course, China dumping steel into the U.S. has been such a sensitive topic here for the past few years. It's one of the central areas of tariffs and trying to control the China-U.S. competition. So it will be sensitive and speaks to competition between both economies. It speaks to the idea that the Biden administration wants to be seen to be protecting jobs in manufacturing, protecting steel workers. Given we're in an election year, it's obvious this deal will remain under scrutiny in the coming months. We'll have to see what kind of conclusion they come to, but any company trying to pull off a sensitive deal like this with China's operations will come under scrutiny, I think.